quite 6:30, but it's within the minute. Okay. Call the meeting of the Rockport Select Board to order, February 10th, 6:30 p.m. on the dot. And the first thing on the agenda is a report on the toboggan race. The Camden Select Board challenged the Rockport Select Board to a match. So
We valiantly tried to beat the Camden Select Board, but unfortunately we were 15/100ths of a second behind Camden. But we all stayed on our toboggan to the end. They totally flipped all over the lake. So I think we
but no injuries.
no injuries. Maybe
That's
the
good.
most important.
Yes.
So we were first loser?
We came in second. Yeah,
Did you have anything to add, Jeff?
There is next year.
next year we're gonna take a little more control over the toboggan we're handed.
Well, you know, when I competed back in 2004, we had our own toboggan, and we very you can see, we
You waxed it.
waxed
We were
it like
handed one at
crazy.
the top, and Diane Hamilton, Jeff's wife, asked if we could have the other toboggan, and they said, no, that one's for Camden, this is for Rockport. So,
That's questionable right there.
Yeah.
That was humor.
yeah,
All
that
right.
was just all in good humor. We're all working together. It was fun. And
That's
nobody
great.
hurt.
That's great. Okay, so seriously, I understand that the special recognition that's been deferred.
Yes, that's gonna
To
be done
next-
in April.
Okay, to April. So the next item, and truly first item on the agenda, is the Emerald Ash Borer presentation. So, you,
So, I think originally I was asked to do
introduce
some of
ourselves.
that for, and a little bit of brown-tail moth as well. Would you still like that or not? Not brown-tail moth.
I would like some of that. Sure. Jan, are you Jan? Jan.
I'm Jane. I'm
Jan,
Colleen, yeah.
okay. All right. So could you guys introduce yourselves? And,
Okay,
that would be
yeah,
great.
I'm Colleen Turling, and I'm one of the entomologists at the Maine Forest Service.
And I'm Jan Santerre. I am the Urban Forestry Program Coordinator for the Maine Forest Service, also known as Project Canopy.
And if you could both speak into the mic.
We have people at home watching.
Okay, all right. And just to let you know, that picture there is how people used to deal with brown-tail moth, and we entomologists now are not nearly that dedicated. You're not going to find me on the top of a ladder like that. So emerald ash borer, very, very briefly, it's an invasive species. We have found it in Maine. This is where it is in Maine. We've got a small spot up north that is spreading fairly slowly because it's still at this point a fairly small spot. Down south, it's coming in from New Hampshire, and you see that sort of big red spot, which is the infested areas in New Hampshire. It's moving into York County, and that's spreading a lot faster because we're at the sort of the leading edge of a front of a large infestation. We also found it in Portland. So it attacks all species of ash. So in Maine, we've got the brown and the white and the green ash. It does not attack mountain ash, so that's not something you need to worry about. Some of the things, I'm not going to give a lot of information because I can't do that in just 5 or 6 minutes. But woodpecker feeding is a really good thing to look for especially at this time of year. Woodpeckers feed on emerald ash borer because the emerald ash borer underneath the bark. We've got a lot of information here, so come and pick some up when we're done. So looking for EAB is looking for woodpecker feeding is a good thing to look for emerald ash borer. Those are just some more pictures of that. We do a lot of monitoring for EAB because we want to know where it is in the state. We use the purple traps, and we will be, again, putting out purple traps this year. We have about 200 to put throughout the whole state. So there will probably be 1 or 2 purple traps in Rockport and up in Camden at the state park. If the town is interested but we're not going to be putting more than probably 1 in the town, if at all, because we just have only 200 for the whole state. If the town is interested in doing trapping, we have some of these green funnel traps that we will provide them, and we'll go and put them up in the trees, but we're looking for cooperators who would be willing to just empty out the insects every week and every 2 weeks during the summer and dump them out into a little baggie and stick them in the freezer for us. And then we'll look to see if there's any EAB. If you saw an EAB, you'd let us know. And so that's something that you can have free of charge. And if there's anybody in the town that would be willing to service it every couple of weeks. Otherwise, there are traps that you can buy, but they're like $40 or so per trap. Another thing that the town can do, and I really, really encourage this, is girdled trap trees. In the spring, we just peel the bark off from around the tree. And then in the winter and the fall, we cut those trees down, we bring them into log peeling workshops that we hold out through various parts of the state, and we peel the bark off of them looking for signs of emerald ash borer. So that map that I showed you of where EAB is, most of those points were found with girdled trap trees. So it's one of our best ways of looking for EAB. And it's something that a lot of towns have done, and I would encourage any town that wants to look for EAB in their town, could keep track of it, do that. So for towns, probably the most important thing you can do is do a tree inventory, know where your ash trees are. That's probably the most important thing. Have a plan when it gets here, because if there are street trees, depending on how many ash you have, you may say, this isn't gonna bother us at all, or it may be a big deal. In this area, there are a lot of ash. I don't know if the town specifically has a lot of ash, but that's making a plan depending on how much ash you have is important. And then monitor girdled trap trees. If part of your plan is going to be, where are the ash trees? Are there ash trees that we know we're going to want to save when EAB gets here? Because EAB is going to get here eventually. And if there are trees you think, you know what, these trees we're not going to save, we're not going to inject them with pesticides every few years, we'll just let them die. Some of those trees you may say, you know what, we'll sacrifice one or two of them now and use them as trap trees. So that's something to think of for trees that are on town property. And it is important, this is more for people who have woodlots, but it's really important to keep ash on the landscape. And I think that's about it. I can very briefly go through brown-tail moth. So you guys are way too familiar with the rash. I've got some information on brown-tail moth here as well. If you guys don't have it, feel free to grab something. Knowing what brown-tail moth looks like in the winter is really important. They spend the winter as young caterpillars that are generally too young to have the toxic hairs at this point in time, but they're inside those tiny little, do we have, no, is that a pointer? No. So yeah, anyway, circled in the up top are the overwintering webs. So inside those little curled up leaves that are tied up in silk and tied onto the branch with silk are anywhere from 50 to 400 little caterpillars in there. And we clipped one of those webs and that's what came out. So each of those is a tiny little caterpillar. So knowing what those look like, getting a good search image for those overwintering webs will tell you where brown-tail moth is going to be bad next year. The other thing you can do for a small tree like a crabapple tree or anything small and shrubby is clip those winter webs out. That's the best thing you can do. You can't clip the webs out of a giant oak tree, but for small trees, you can beg, borrow, or steal pole pruners and just clip them out. A lot of towns further south where brown-tail has been a big issue for quite a while, the town libraries have bought pole pruners and they just rent them out, or they lend them out, I think, with a deposit, and that's something that might be worthwhile for you guys here. And it's a picture there from the air. You can see over to the left side of the lake there, all those trees that look kind of brown. That's where it was completely defoliated by brown-tail moth. Camden, Rockport area is probably going to turn out to be red this year. So it's probably going to be as bad next year as it was this year, possibly worse. We have found, sort of in the central area where brown-tail has been for a while, there is a fungus that caused a lot of localized population collapse. So, and that's something Tom Schmelk is the guy who's going to be who is working on brown-tail moth. He has been talking and thinking about things like, maybe picking up caterpillars from the central area where we know the fungus is in big numbers, and it has caused this collapse in past years, or this past year, and maybe just collecting some of those caterpillars and bringing them to new areas, thinking, okay, adding an additional 100 healthy caterpillars to an area that there's already a ton of brown-tail moth isn't going to do much, but if you bring in some of those disease caterpillars, you might spread that fungus. It's a fungus that's particular to caterpillars and this particular caterpillar. So that's something that he is potentially interested in. And he's one person, he can't go out and do this to all of the towns, but if there's anybody that is potentially interested in cooperating with him from the town, give him a call. I'm not making any promises for him, but I know he is potentially interested in stuff like that. And so, there is a little bit of support if towns are willing to be engaged and be involved, that, the state will help as we can. And there is, if you dial 211, there are answers there. We have people that we have trained and given answers about brown-tail moth. It's a really good resource. I suggest you use it as much as possible, or I recommend you use it. And we also have a webpage, and if you just Google brown-tail moth FAQ, it will take you to the first hit will be on the Maine Forest Service frequently asked questions, and we have hundreds and hundreds of questions in all sorts of different categories, and that's all that I've got.
So,
Very, very short.
yeah, I'll run through my presentation. I'm just going to reiterate really a lot of what Colleen said about EAB. I'm not going to touch on brown-tail at all, not my expertise. So again, my name is Jan Santerre, and how do I get...
hit the escape key.
Okay.
Okay, and then if you hit the escape key again, I think.
Okay.
And then you hit the red button. Close that out.
Is that right? Okay.
And your
And then-
presentation should be right here, I believe.
Right.
Double click that. Okay.
There it goes.
And then
Okay.
the green button.
This mouse is very
That'll
low.
expand it out. And then you go to slideshow. Play from the start. I think you'll see
Is
what-
that one there?
Yeah, that one right there.
Okay. Thanks for that. I couldn't see any of that. So again, my name is Jan Santerre. I am the program coordinator for the state's urban forestry program called Project Canopy. And I call it urban forestry, but really it's town forestry and rural community forestry. We don't have a lot of urban areas in the state of Maine. But again, I'm going to reiterate a lot of what Colleen mentioned. I want to first applaud you for asking us here and being curious about what actions you can take as a community to prepare for things like emerald ash borer. That's in many ways the most important step that you can take to protecting your community. So thank you for having us. And then also just coming away from this, I don't expect you to come up with a plan tonight or in the coming weeks or even necessarily in the coming months, but to know that there's resources out there available to you to help assist you along in this journey is very important. So the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, we have a website dedicated to EAB management, and maine.gov/EAB is that link. And we have all of these resources that we have here with us tonight available there in PDF format for you to be able to hand out in your town hall, community events, etc. We have things like a sample municipal EAB management plan. It just covers some very basic and broad categories of things that you need to think about in your management plan for dealing with this coming pest. Many other resources for homeowners, for forest landowners, links to things like licensed arborists who are going to be your friends in both treating ash trees that you want to save, as well as removing ash trees that you know will have to be removed. Pesticide applicators, guidelines for how you're going to deal with that downed wood when the bug is here. You don't want to perpetuate the spread of this pest. So there's best management practices, and those are listed up there as well. And then it also has links to things like grants. There are some resources that are available to you in addressing the planning and the management of EAB when it gets here. I think one of the things that spurred the town to contact us was some recognition of the fact that the town of Camden had done a EAB response plan. There was some PR about that. They received a grant through Project Canopy that helped them fund development of that plan, hiring an intern, et cetera. So if you're interested in grants for this current year, I will let you know that we do have an RFP out right now for Project Canopy grants. Those grants are due on March 6th, and there is a required training that is taking place this week. It's web-based training. And Rockport has availed itself of Project Canopy grants in the past. In fact, currently, the town has a grant to do some planting in the community. So, again, reiterating what Colleen already mentioned, you know, some things that you need to do or you should be thinking about doing to prepare. The first and foremost is just making yourself aware of the pest and what its implications are. But then you need to really assess what your risk is. And you assess your risk by looking at what your ash resource is within the community. An inventory of your ash trees specifically is a very basic thing that you can do to assess your risk. And then you also want to look at things like, you know, what volunteer groups you have in the community that can help you to spread the word, maybe folks that would potentially help you to conduct an inventory, if you have tree-related policies, staff, arborists, who the pesticide applicators are that are nearby. And you also want to think about things like emergency management too. That this is a very important pest to folks managing your roadways. Ash have a tendency, once they have this pest for a few years, to completely disintegrate and cause potential serious safety issues for rights of way and such. You also want to look at things like, you know, what your timeline for management would be, your budget, trees that you want to save. Ash can be a big, beautiful, and statuesque tree in your community. Those are trees that you want to think about preserving. And I should step back too. Preservation of trees, where trees are healthy, is actually the more cost-effective way to address this pest. If you have healthy trees, there's really no reasonable reason to consider removing those trees. If they're unhealthy to begin with, that's something that you do want to think about removing. But healthy trees are going to be more cost-effective to save. And then you also want to think about things like replanting, because nobody wants a community without trees. Again, there's tools available to you in the Midwest where they've been dealing with this pest for a lot longer. They've done a lot of work for us. Once you have something like an inventory, you can dump that inventory into these cost calculators and assign some costs to, you know, how much it costs to take down a 12-inch tree, and it will spit out some budgetary numbers to help guide you moving forward in your budgeting process. Again, you know, you want to target your ash removal. It really is a cost balance that you have to take into consideration. You want to, in your planning process, look at those ash trees that have poor form or are potentially hazardous, bad locations, or maybe, you just want to reduce the population in certain areas. As Colleen mentioned, you do have a lot of ash here along the mid-coast, in your riparian areas and such, so it is a significant concern. And then you want to look at your goals moving forward of transitioning your community trees to a tree canopy that's going to be more resistant to this pest and hopefully others as well. Colleen mentioned monitoring efforts. This is a great place to involve public in looking at early EAB detection. You can use volunteers to do inventory, to help with traps, biosurveillance, all sorts of stuff. So I encourage you certainly to get the public involved to the extent that they're willing. Stepping back again, we don't have EAB close by. We at the Maine Forest Service, as far as recommendations go, don't recommend any treatment of ash trees until the pest is known to be within 15 miles. So you're a long ways off from having to treat any of your trees or recommending to homeowners in the community that they would treat trees. That would be an unnecessary cost and also an unnecessary use of pesticides. So, that's that. And then, I would just encourage you, I don't think the town has an inventory of its trees currently. That would be the first step I would encourage you to consider, either applying for a grant or reaching out to us to maybe do a volunteer-assisted type of tree inventory, that sort of thing. So, that was that. And you guys, I think, have time for questions.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
they're probably
Yeah.
all about brown-tail moth.
Yeah. Questions on the board? Board, your question?
Well, one question, have you captured the best practices? It looked as though the lower part of New Hampshire was big into emerald ash borer.
Yes. Yeah.
What are they doing, and can you shamelessly steal those practices so that it can be put into better effect here?
We have been learning a lot from everybody else who's been doing this for the past 5-10 years. So yes, we are, and some of the things that we've been talking about today have been some of those practices. There is no way of stopping it in its tracks. All we can do is slow down the spread, and then as towns or communities deal with, saving some of the ash trees. As a state, what we're doing is we're releasing biological control agents as EAB moves into an area. So there are teeny tiny little natural enemies that attack only emerald ash borer that we put out in areas where EAB has come. Those will not save the trees that are standing now, but as the trees grow up, the next generation of trees, it's looking very promising that those trees will be protected. Using pesticides to save some of the trees is looking like it's probably going to be more and more important just to help keep ash on the landscape until the biocontrol kind of kicks in. Some of the things we've learned is that white ash is much more resistant than black or brown ash. Green ash is sort of intermediate. That's sort of something if the town is looking at wanting to save trees, white ash tends to have a little bit of an advantage overall anyway. And that's probably going to be some more of the sort of the big, important trees for the town are likely to be white ash. So there are things like that we can learn and we have learned. And then just a lot of things like some of our best management practices for slowing down the spread, management of tree waste, management of firewood, good practices for firewood dealers, things like that, because we know that's how it spreads. On its own, this insect only spreads maybe half a mile a year. It's when human beings get in that we spread it far and wide quickly.
Are nurseries still selling ash trees?
Not a whole lot, because live ash trees cannot move outside of the quarantine at all. Other things like wood and chips and stuff like that can be treated in such a way and can be received in such a way that you can get a compliance agreement, they can be moved across, but live trees, no. So there's trees are it's not recommended that towns plant ash trees
No,
anymore.
I'm
There's
just
just
wondering
not
if
much.
homeowners are landscaping and don't, I mean, it's hard to believe they wouldn't hear of this, but
It's not forbidden, so certainly a retailer can sell
Can sell
ash
someone an ash
as long as it hasn't come from
From,
an
Right.
area.
yeah,
which
or it's
isn't the
been
best long-term
certified.
plan.
yeah.
No, it's not.
But I have seen, small ash trees being planted in parking lots and things like that. I think, God, that's just not smart.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you will find in like large-scale developments where they're doing, landscaping parking areas and that sort of thing. Ash is
There's
continuing to be used because it's honestly probably being sold at a fraction of the
Yeah.
cost of many of its other
Yeah.
options. So,
Any other questions?
Are some of these available for us to put over at the town office?
You can take as
all of
much of
this,
this,
yeah.
all of it if you like.
Thank you.
yep. And again, everything is available for download too, but if you ever want more hard copies, we can
Yeah.
make sure that you get those.
Questions from the audience? Okay. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it.
Yep, thanks again for
Okay.
having us.
Thank you.
It's interesting.
All right. Next item is the town manager's report.
The town is offering a free overview class on a CPR AED first aid to all Rockport committee members. We thought that this was a good idea since every town building has an AED located in the building, and we've had some feedback from some committee members looking for this type of training. So the class will be Monday, May 4th, from 5:30 to 7:30 in the Richardson Room at the town office. We've had a tremendous response already from committee members. They all were contacted by email. So if the board members are interested in that, you have that on your calendar, hopefully. Another thing to put on your calendar is Tuesday, February 18th at 4 in the Richardson Room. Legacy Rockport is hosting Edward Sheridan to hear a proposal for preserving the lime kilns. So I think this is an important one to attend if you can. The Union and Central Russell intersection up here by the library. I've been working with Public Works Director Mike Young, Police Chief, MDOT, and 5 builders and architects on that intersection about when we're going to be rerouting traffic, if you will, moving the fence line from where it is now out so that they can begin work on that intersection. And we're looking at probably within 3 weeks. They'll be doing it with Jersey barriers to block that intersection. We do have permission to remove that island that's at that location so that we can ease the turn from
Yeah.
Union Street onto Russell.
That's great.
So that'll be happening. We'll be having a meeting with Phi at some point within the next week, I believe, to go over the work plan there and what steps we need to take a look at. The parking work group met again on January 31st to review data for the updated downtown parking survey prepared by planner Bill Napower and also McEd staff member Hannah Sisk. Essentially, discussion at that meeting centered around where additional spaces could be developed in the future, how many we obviously currently have, so we do have an updated survey, but also the need for a parking plan, a future parking plan. The next steps include measuring widths of streets in the downtown area, the village area, and reviewing the town's rights-of-way and exploring potential properties for future parking areas. So we will be providing all of this information too that we develop will be public once we've gone through the process of our exercises. But that's moving along pretty well.
As part of that work group, I have a few thoughts, but I'll save them till the end when we have the liaison report.
Okay.
As you know, I'm a member of the Maine Municipal Association's Legislative Policy Committee. We had our first meeting on January 30th, and it's an all-day meeting that included reviewing, discussing, and voting on proposed legislation affecting municipalities. At that meeting, we covered 50 different proposals. And with 70 members on the LPC, you can imagine it was a long, lengthy, interesting day. Interestingly, with this short session of the legislature where they're only supposed to be hearing held over bills and emergency legislation, they're printing bills fast and furious. And there actually won't be a second meeting of the LPC because of that. So we're handling all of our business by polls, which is not as effective or efficient as far as I'm concerned as having a meeting to deal with all of that.
Bill, are there bills that are of particular interest or benefit to Rockport?
There are several that would have a potential effect. I'm not going to reel off a list now, but I certainly
Okay,
could
but
provide
there are a
you.
few that you're particularly interested in on our behalf?
Yes, yeah, there are. The RES redevelopment committee met on January 30th, and the intention of that meeting was to hear a presentation from representatives of the Rockport Crossing proposal that were submitted in the first RFQ. Unfortunately, they were called out of, reps were called out of country on business, so they couldn't attend the meeting. Instead, the committee reviewed the evaluation criteria that staff had put together that will be used to review each proposal that does come in, and as well as the process for the review. As you probably remember, the RFQ deadline for the reissued RFQ is February 28th. So the committee had set their next meeting for March 19th at 5:30 here in this room. The thought is that they will get the proposals that have come in by the deadline of the 28th, have a chance to review them with the evaluation criteria that they have, and then discuss them at that meeting, and then decide at that point which ones they'd like to hear from, whether it's all of them, depending on how many there are, and go from there. I will be applying for a summer intern through the Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center at the University of Maine. The deadline for submitting a proposal for the intern is March 1st. I've had tremendous success in my previous position with interns through this program. And I'm also applying for a grant for $2,000 with Maine Municipal that would help offset the cost of the intern. That being said, we do have funding in the budget for the intern. So if the $2,000 does come in a grant form, then it will just help offset some of our costs.
What are your
Yeah, what are your
plans
projects?
for,
I'm still formulating them. I've talked with staff, with the department heads, and I'm trying to have it. One thing, when you're applying for these interns, you want to make sure that you have worthwhile projects that will keep them busy. In my experience, when you have somebody that has 40 hours a week for 12 weeks, they get a lot of stuff done, and they do it very well. So it's important to keep them busy and have a full list. At the same time, the interns that, the students that are applying for these internships, the Margaret Chase Smith Policy Center will match them with towns. So we need to put together a broad list so we can match up as much as we possibly can. But we're looking at things such as the website, for instance, is one project that we've identified that we can't necessarily get to right now, to be able to update that. Also working with the Opera House website. Those are off the top of our heads, those are two projects that, that are sitting there that we need some more assistance with. But I do have a list from staff that have been developing it over the past few weeks. Brown-tail moth information, as I said I would, I had issued a press release last week that has landed in the local media, reminding residents that now is the time that they should be cutting the nests out of the trees and disposing of them in soapy water or burning those nests. I think it's important that residents understand that now is the time to do that, get rid of those caterpillars. It obviously will stop the infestation in their area, in their backyards, if they can reach the nests. If they can't reach the nests, then that obviously is another problem. And they should contact an arborist. There are several in the area that are licensed to treat, whether it's through injections or spraying or trimming as well. And you heard certainly some of the information tonight as well, which you all are well aware of. It's important to note that I am working with a local arborist, and I've identified some funding in the contingency amount that the board had put into the budget so that we can attack the problem this year in Walker Park as well as March Jones Field, and then building money into the budget for next year too, because you have to do it more. You can't do it just one year. You've got to continue working on the projects for the town properties that were severely affected this past year. So we are working on that, and hopefully by the time your next meeting comes around, or the one in March, we'll have a plan that I can present to you that what we're going to be doing this spring to do that. The Walker Park seawall bids were opened last Thursday. We had 5 bidders, I should say, which is a good number. The bids ranged in price from $39,000 to $74,500. So there was a
What was the top number?
$74,500. We're investigating the low bidder currently to see if there's been similar projects that have been done by this company. Because of the time frame and the fact that there is no money in the budget for this, we had bid it out a couple of different ways. One with it being done now with the abutters, and then another doing it in the fall after the abutters property has already been done. And I think 3 out of the 5 bids, there was no difference in price. So,
Is any of, is any of the top 1 or 2 or 3 Rockport business?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I know there's one that's a Rockport business that bid in there. Out of the 5, I'm not sure if there's 2 or not.
And if we didn't do it sort of now, how long would we put it off for, and what would the inflationary cost be? Ballpark?
There is no increase in cost if we wait until the fall. My plan has been to put it in the budget for the fall.
They've guaranteed those prices
Yes.
for 6 months or whatever?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I was just wondering if the low bid was one of the ones that didn't have a price increase. if the work-
They are one that did not have a price increase. Yep. Just another question?
No, on a different topic. Go ahead.
Okay. The fiscal year 2021 budget will be printed this week and delivered to Select Board and Budget Committee members. The first budget review meeting is next Wednesday, I believe, the 19th. So keep that in mind. And Officer Poole resigned effective today. So he is no longer in the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, so we have one vacancy in the police department. And the last thing that I'll note is that at the end of the meeting, don't run off, because I've been instructed to get a photo of the Select Board for the town report. That's all for me tonight.
Following up on Denise's question, on the legislation, did you get a listing from MMA with a description of the bills?
Sure, yep.
Yeah, could you circulate that to the board?
I
just
sure
so
can.
that we can have some kind of idea of what's out there?
Yep, I sure can.
Thank you. Anything else on the manager's report? Moving on. The next item is public input on non-agenda items, so if anybody is here tonight that wants to make comments on something that's not on the agenda, now's your time.
Please be brief.
Okay, that was brief. All right, the next item is amendments to the agenda. Does anyone have some suggested amendments? Hearing none. The next item is the consent agenda.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? 5-0-0. Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is action items, and we have an application from Eric Winters for the Rockport Parks and Beautification Committee. Is Eric here? Could you step up? Welcome.
Thank you.
Could you just give us a little bit about you, maybe some of the things that you'd put in your application so the audience can hear, and so forth, your interest in the committee?
Yes, ma'am. So, my name is Eric Winters. I've been living in Rockport for just under 20 years. I have a young daughter who's 6 in the local school system. I work for Cedar Works and have been doing so for about the last 5 years. My initial interest in the committee came from how Nani Wallace and Doug Cole came to Barrett and Barrett Brown, who's the owner of Cedar Works, for some playground equipment for Conundrum Park above in the Harbor Park area. And I was brought in as a consultant to essentially just see if it was a feasible alternative to what's there currently. And so conversation evolved, and Haunani basically asked me if I had any interest in serving on the committee. And I hadn't really thought about it too hard, and then when I realized that the service that I was providing to the committee was essentially something that I do professionally and is something that's very easy and for me to do, and I thought to myself, well, this would be a really good opportunity for me to provide some service to the town. I do believe in the power of being outside. I believe in the power of public open spaces. I believe in the power of play for children, and basically being outside for anyone. And so I thought that I have a skill set that could be applicable to the Parks Committee. So I am a licensed certified playground safety inspector. I do all of Cedar Works' large-scale donations. I work as a liaison from the sales team to any sort of commercial customers. I've developed 3 different playground lines, commercial playground lines, since I came on at Cedar Works. I was brought on to develop commercial lines, which is essentially anything like public playground areas, like the park systems here, hotels, schools, childcare facilities, large-scale apartment buildings, things like that.
Hunani couldn't be here tonight to speak in Eric's behalf because she broke a toe and she's kind of at home recovering. But again, we would welcome him very much to this committee. We think he'll make a good contribution, and it's a nice new face, and we're all for it, so that's great.
I move the board appoint Eric Winters to the Parks and Beautification Committee with a term ending June 30th, 2021.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? 500.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest.
You're
and,
welcome to stay or
yeah.
not.
Well, and we'll have to tap into you for, maybe for the RES redevelopment committee, huh, at some point.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
At that note.
Not yet, we're a
One-
little.
one
we're-
step
we're
at a
not
time.
quite there yet, yeah.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, the next item on the agenda is Comprehensive Plan Committee applications. We have 1 vacancy for a citizen position for that committee, and we have 3 excellent applications. Is Jared here tonight? I don't think that Jared is able to make it, but I think we all know Jared on the other
Budget
committees,
and
Budget
Investment
Committee and
Committee.
Investment, that's one, the additional one. Okay, the next application in order, I think, is Paul Charbonneau? Yeah. Could you come up?
Hi.
Hi. So, thank you for submitting an application, and we all received your narrative here. You have quite a history as a court-appointed, experience as a court-appointed mediator and other. I think that some of these committees need some mediation, but or will need some mediation. Anyway, would you like to make a few comments for the board, or?
Well, I don't know where to start. At my age, it's a long history, so I don't want to take too much of your time. Excuse me. But most of my professional career was in the field of dispute resolution and mediation. Had a private practice as well. I think I enjoyed relative success in that field, enjoyed doing it immensely. Learned to appreciate the role of the law. Picked up a lot. I'm not a lawyer, but I picked up a lot of it just by listening to lawyers argue over the law. Some of it sinks in after a while. But that work has also convinced me of the importance of collaboration and cooperation in difficult conversations that people can have, and that, and sometimes you have to be willing to, the expression I use is sit in the fire without being burnt yourself, and help facilitate a productive conversation where all the parties can be okay with the outcome, whatever that outcome is. As a mediator, of course, you're tasked with being impartial and neutral, even though sometimes in your heart you might not be feeling that way. You have to nonetheless try very much not to show or let anybody have any idea what you might be feeling about a situation. So I don't know what else to add on that, except that I have served on the library committee twice. Once, I've been a resident in Rockport. It'll be 45 years this month. So when we first got here, I was on the library committee, was there when the painting was discovered or revealed its value, and the trust was set up at that time. And then recently I was on the library committee as well. And I was also one of the founders of the Friends of the Rockport Library. So I don't know if you have any other
And I think-
questions or about
And I
that.
think one of the reasons, I asked Paul if he would submit an application, and I think one of the primary reasons is his, having lived here as long as he has, his historical recollection of things would go a fair bit to going through what is currently in place for the comp plan and perhaps help steer things for the future. So that's why I asked Paul to apply, and I'm glad he did.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for applying, and thank you for all your service to the town in the past. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very
Very
much.
comprehensive description, so thank you. Jan? Jan Rosenbaum is our third applicant for the position vacancy.
I'm Jan Rosenbaum. I think I know most of the select board. I have not met our new town manager yet. Welcome. A nice short report. I love that. I've been in the town now 22 years. I got involved with town government through the library first. I was president of the Friends of the Library for a few years, a long time ago. I joined the Budget Committee and served 2 terms there as chair of the Budget Committee. Mark worked with me the last year or two that I was on that committee. In the Budget Committee, I thought was an interesting place to be because you got to see how the entire town worked, and I got to comment on it and hear comments on it and find out what priorities looked like from different points of view, whether you were a department head or a select board head, whether you're responsible for the finances of the community or just a taxpayer. And I got to play both roles. The one I maintain is as a taxpayer. The plan that we have now expired in 2014, which is now 6 years out of date. The state, I believe, prefers that you not go out of date, that you do a new plan every 10 years based on what you think is going to happen in the next 10 years and how you want to position your town, what's working, what's not working. It's like moving. You pick up everything that you own one piece at a time, take a look at it, decide whether you want to bring it with or not. What I see for the town in the future, I'm afraid, is trouble that's beyond our ability to control, and that's climate change. We need to be ready. We need to think about and analyze what will happen. We're a working harborfront town on the coast of the ocean that is warming faster than any place else in the world, as far as I know, the Penobscot Bay. We're in for some time. We're in for some problems. A group that I sit on the board of brings in speakers, and in December we brought in Paul Majewski, who is the head of the Climate Institute at the University of Maine. He's an Arctic and Antarctic explorer. He thinks we're going to double our population as a state in the next 20 years because of climate refugees. People coming to Maine because it's too hot or too wet or too humid or on fire wherever they're currently living, and they're looking at us. And I have run into such people, and if you pay attention, you will find them coming here and beginning to settle, possibly as summer people at first, but summer people become long-term residents as they get older, and more dependent on the community and on the services that the community can provide to them. And they also have to look at what's going to happen to their property values, what's going to happen to their town. Does Rockport want to double in size without paying attention to how that's going to happen? I don't think so. I think that the next 10 years are going to be different than the last 10 years. And the 10 years after that are going to be different from these 10 years. We're changing at geometric rates now, not arithmetic rates. So I think the point of a comprehensive plan has changed. Instead of figuring out how to keep who we are for the next 10 years, instead of saying, well, historically we've looked like this, so let's keep looking like this because it's been working for a long time, it may be time to reevaluate what our priorities are. Where in the budget do we have to make long-term plans? Where do we have to start working with outside people now to understand what's going to face our harbor and our local industry and our tourist trade and our real estate and a whole lot of other things that need to be done. And so I think right now, the most important job that one can have that is not quite as hard as select board work is on the Comprehensive Planning Committee. And I think this is a long project and should have people on it who are in for the long. It's going to take a while to figure out what's wrong, what might go wrong, and it's going to take even longer to come to conclusions, to agree, to get consensus with the voters as to what can be done to ameliorate some of the dangers that we're going to be facing in the next 10 years. I think it's a fascinating place to work, and I think it's quite important, and this is where I want to put my time right now. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And Jared, I shouldn't give short shrift since he wasn't able to make it. He did submit an application. He wants to serve on the committee, be part of future plans and progression and growth of Rockport, listen and help represent all citizens of Rockport in the process. He is the owner of a small business and looking to expand in the number of full-time employees and locations. This requires substantial planning to understand client needs, marketing, personal, and long-term strategy for growth, which are some of the things that in his background that brings him to this committee. And as we said, he's on the investment committee and budget committee as well. So, open up for motions, discussion.
I'll motion to support the candidate that I recruited. And that would be, I motion to support Jared Cronkite as the remaining one position left on the Comprehensive Plan Committee, although there are 3 excellent candidates in here, and it will be tough to sort through. We'll let the process do its thing.
Is there a second?
Okay, so that motion fails.
It is a tough one.
Really good applicants who put good thought into this. And
Yeah, I'll just say my piece. There's no question, well, first of all, I'd be happy with any one of these folks being on the committee. Paul and Jan, over the years, have certainly done yeoman service, and I thank them for that. Jared's a little bit newer, has a little fresher viewpoint. But I don't know who I'm going to support right now. I could say I could support any one of them.
I know it would have been nice if Jared could be here. I know he had been emailed a couple of times to each of his emails, and to my knowledge, he hadn't replied. I mean, I work with him on the Budget Committee, and he is pretty sharp.
I think we did make a decision, though, in recent meetings that we didn't have to be present at these committee. appointments, so.
Well, I'll go with my, I move the board appoint Paul Charbonneau to the Comprehensive Plan Committee. See if we get a second on that one.
I'll second.
Discussion? It looks like you're trying to say something.
Well, I am, and I'm uncomfortable because I do appreciate the applications, and I appreciate the interest. I guess I was, for myself, I appreciated Jan's thoughtfulness on an issue that we don't talk about very often, which is climate change. And yes, we all want things like broadband, and we want good development in Rockport, and those are all things that I think the Comprehensive Plan Committee will deal with, as well as land use and how we work with our ordinance and prepare the town for the kind of development that its citizens want. But I was struck by the thoughtfulness that Jan had put into sort of the analysis of some of the bigger picture items that we as a community need to look at and tap into resources that are available to us to really look at how we protect our town, our working harbor for the future. So that's sort of where I started to come out as I was listening to Jan.
Anything else? Okay. There's a motion on the table to appoint Paul Charbonneau. So all in favor? This is tough because I, too, could go for any of the three, but we at least have first and second and one individual. I don't know. It's tough, but I did vote in favor.
So
Mark, I guess we need to take
Yeah,
a
you can do the roll. What's the vote?
roll. Mark,
4.
Jeff,
4.
Denise,
I don't really want to say against, but I guess it's a no.
Doug.
No.
All right, and I am for.
Okay, 3 excellent candidates.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Thank you.
Jan, are you, you have some really valuable things, though, to say. I mean, there might be some role that you can still play with the group. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, because I think that there's a role there for you, some way.
Well, again, those meetings are open to the public.
Yes, well, for sure, and there might
encouraged
be a role, I'm thinking in terms of presentation on certain things, that, you have a particular interest in, as you've mentioned. Jeff and I are both liaisons to that group, and so I would love to see you play a role like that. Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
Won't be quite as hard on the next one, there's only one applicant.
As a matter of fact, I move the board appoint Sandra Fabian to the Pesticide Advisory Board with a term ending June 30th, 2023.
Is there a second? Sandra's not here, is she? Oh, she is. Sandra. Okay. Oh, let's come talk to us first, yeah.
It's all in picking the right committee.
Hi, I'm Sandra Fabian, and I am relatively new to Rockport. I've been here about 4 years, so I think you're a newbie for quite a while, so, so still feeling pretty new. So there is an opening on the Pest Control Committee, and I am a member of the Garden Club, and so I'm interested in being the Garden Club representative to the Pest Control Committee. My educational background is in biology and public health, and I have previously done pest control inspections as part of my work. I had mainly been in a health inspection capacity. So I've done health inspections involving vector control as well. And I've also developed pest control plans for, in a corporate capacity, for a large food chain. And I think especially based upon the first presentation that we saw today on the emerald ash borer, and we all know about the brown-tailed moth, I think there's definitely going to be a lot of interest in the area of pest control coming up, and things that, pests that we just need to anticipate affecting the area. And I feel that my educational background and my experience would add to the committee. Thanks.
Experience is great. Thank you for submitting an
Have you
application.
met Cheryl Lichty?
Yes.
Okay, good. You're familiar.
Yeah,
Where
thanks.
in Lower Marion Township were you?
So I worked for the township, so they're headquartered out of Ardmore.
Okay.
I'll second Doug's motion.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is act on a request for speed limit study for Rockland Street at Route 17. You want to talk about this, Bill?
Sure, so you have the letter in your packets, requests for a speed reduction on Route 17, and then I've tried to put a couple of maps in there to try to illustrate what the gentleman is talking about. But essentially, if you're at the intersection of 90 and 17 and then head towards Rockland, the speed limit is 35 miles an hour. And then a little ways past the post office, it jumps up to 55. On the other side of the intersection, if you're headed towards Hope, it goes from 35 to 45 and then to 55. And from my understanding, that was corrected by MDOT a few years back, around 2014 or so.
What was correct?
The speed from going towards Hope. So
We,
it went to that stepped up.
We made a request back when I was there, and the idea was that they were gonna do a reduction on both sides, coming and going towards the intersection of 90 and 17. It never happened, and then Randy contacted him through Rick, and, you know, they did the Augusta side, but
Right.
they didn't do the other side. And the gentleman, I spoke with him today, and he said it was okay to speak on his behalf. I assume he's home watching, but he's right at where the 55 changes as you're coming west.
Yes.
And it goes from 55 to 35 as you're coming down by the dentist office, the post office there, and people are still driving a fair amount over what they should be. And it's through no lack of enforcement, because I know the guys have been out there, but he had an accident out in front of his driveway the other day, and I know with the fatality that happened further towards Rockland, you know, it's an opportunity to reach out, I think, to DOT and see if they'll reassess that and see if they'll give us a little help.
Yes, and I did, Mike Young did reach out to the traffic engineer, because we were looking for the history about when and why that side hadn't been addressed. Didn't really give us an answer as to why that side hadn't been addressed, but of course said that they'd be more than happy to come out, but to be careful what you wish for.
Hey, yeah.
So, because his plan would be to look at both sides again, and may make adjustments that we might not necessarily like.
Might they take the 45 away on the other side?
Potential they could, of course, but I don't think that they will, just simply because of the amount of traffic there and the amount of entrances that are there. It would be, I think they'd be hard pressed to do that. But they certainly, if we send them the letter requesting them to look at the Rockland side, then they'll come and do a speed study.
I think this is a reasonable request. To that end, I move the board direct the manager to ask the state to conduct a speed study on Rockland Road near the Route 90 intersection as requested by the concerned individual.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? 500. Great. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Of course.
The next item on the agenda is the Rockport Emergency Operations Plan, over which we have no control, right?
Well, I think we should probably go through this page by page and line by line tonight, if you'd
I
like.
did, I have notes. Are you ready?
Ready. So the emergency operation plan is reviewed each year to make adjustments, changes. If you did go through the plan, you'll note that most of the changes in there, if not all of them, are simply changing names for new people in new positions, or different people in positions, as well as email addresses that have been updated, some dates, that sort of thing. But this is the plan that's created in conjunction with Knox County Emergency Management, that will be implemented should we have some sort of a natural or otherwise disaster in the town.
I move that the board approve the Town of Rockport Emergency Operations Plan amended on February 10th, 2020.
Second.
Just quick discussion.
Yep.
Often in these plans, and I'm sure you may have tried to get that done, the reference to the position as opposed to the person, and then having one table near the front, so that way you only have to revise a couple pages as opposed to throughout the document, may be easier going forward. However, it appears to be only in a very few places that the actual reference to the person in the email are here. It's just hard to keep track of.
Yes.
Great idea. I just wanted to make a few comments referencing amateur radio as part of this plan. It's loosely referred to in several places throughout the document. I guess the next time around, I'd like to see it memorialized a little bit more. We have a citizen, Phil Gaudet, who has been spending a lot of time getting an antenna up on the town office building and getting equipment donated from the Knox EMA for us to use in our emergency operations center. And I believe that can be a good resource to have if things get bad. So first I want to recognize Phil for the work he's done, getting that all set up. And again, I would just ask that we seriously take into consideration that availability when we do drills and things like that.
And just so that you know, I don't know if you knew or not, but the antenna is up and functioning and connected and the like, and the radios are all ready to go.
Yep.
And our deputy EMA director is attending training so that she can become a ham radio operator as well, so that we have somebody on staff that will be able to do that.
I am too.
Yes, I know. But somebody on staff that will be able to do that as well.
Unfortunate that the tabletop exercise is on April 1st, a date that I think that neither Denise nor I can make.
Nor I.
Or you, so, yeah, I mean, it's important, I think, for the.
Oh, yeah.
For the select board to participate and.
Well, this brings up an interesting point, and it came up last year, the same thing. You say the select board, it's important for us to participate, but if you look throughout this document, the buck stops with us. So it's not like we just participate.
Right.
And with all due respect, Bill and I may have a little different viewpoint on this. We're the ultimate people that are responsible for this, and we kind of call the shots and whatnot, so.
We're required by law to take the training, which
Yeah.
we've all taken, but then when there's an actual tabletop exercise, 3 of the 5 of us can't make it because no offense to you, Bill, but I mean, as I understand, the county dictated the,
Well, I can check with the EMA director and see if we can
and
change
it
that
just
date,
happens that
so.
I'm out of town then. I'm rarely out of town, but
Yeah.
I am out of town then,
The
so.
side of the coin is, though, that's a good simulation of an emergency situation. I mean, there's a pretty good chance
people will
that
be out of town
any of us could be
Right.
out of town.
But none of the 3 of us, I think, have participated in the past, have we? In any of these tabletop exercises? Well, certainly not you, not me, and Jeff, not you.
Not with the county.
So,
The only other comment, too, is on the callback tree that we have in the very back. We see that Deborah Hall, the select board chair, gets notified, but there should be another arrow that, she then contacts people on the select board to notify
Yeah.
them.
For sure.
See, more to it than you thought.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor? 500. All right, so you'll think about that date.
I'll check with Ray and see what we can do.
Okay, so the next, moving into discussion items. The next item on the agenda is 2A Architect's presentation and discussion regarding West Rockport Fire Station. Amanda.
And we also have Bill Lane here as well.
And Bill Lane, okay.
Thank you for having us here tonight to go through the proposal we've presented. We've been involved, at least in the discussion of the fire station, for around 2 years now. We had previously submitted a proposal last summer that was approved but was not acted on, so we have not started any work with respect to the fire station at all. Bill asked us to come tonight just to provide kind of an overview of the proposal we presented and the services that were included there. We obviously come to you to ask your approval to proceed. We understand we haven't been approved to do that, and like I say, we haven't yet, so any questions you have are more than welcome. Bill's here. Obviously, you all understand that work has been done on the site already to prepare for this project. So Bill's here to answer any additional questions you might have about the upcoming scope of work or the work that's been done.
Thank you, Amanda. Let me just say
Yeah.
that, we've been, it's not from lack of interest, it's just that we
Yes.
were, as you know, we were changing from one town manager
Yes.
retiring to a new town manager who hadn't arrived yet, so that was why things didn't get done last summer.
Absolutely, understood,
So.
and these things just take time, so
Yeah.
we're here whenever you're ready to begin. The other thing we wanted to talk about tonight was just to open the door to some further discussion around the process you'd like to see for this project, how you envision yourselves and your approvals coming down the pike through the process, public engagement, public meetings around it, and just to get some initial thoughts around that so we can make sure our proposal suits the process you have in mind, and that we're engaging everyone in the process that we should. So I think you have that proposal in your packet, and there are probably a couple of documents in there. We had included the schematic design proposal and cost estimating proposal, which will get us through those two phases. And then Bill also asked us to look at work beyond that. So after this would be put out to the public for approval on the cost estimate, those phases that would follow, which are design development, construction documents, process you're probably well familiar with at this point.
And I didn't include that in your package just because that's down the road.
Okay.
So the second part I didn't, the first phase is what you see in front of you.
Okay. So we have put that together if there's ever any questions about that, and I'll just briefly talk you through the rest of that process too. But what we've done so far is we've been in conversation with Bill Lane and with Chief Peasley around the requirements for the project. We based our proposal on those discussions as well as some preliminary sketches that were done that really just provided a summary of the concept. And that concept for the building is a 2-bay, 4-vehicle storage facility for the vehicles, sleeping quarters for staff upstairs, volunteers upstairs, and then the other support spaces like a meeting room, fairly large meeting room, showers, toilet room, storage, etc. So that's what we based our proposal on. The initial phase of work, the purpose of schematic design is really to further define those requirements, and to also decide further detail about them. What's required in the meeting room space, what's required for the vehicle base, things like that. And then to define all the constraints around the project. What's the zoning, what's the permitting requirements, what are the building code requirements. And then we've also included for this project feedback from Bill Lane and the other staff at Gartley and Dorsey, such as the structural engineer and the mechanical and plumbing engineer, in an effort to, it's always excellent and advisable to have that feedback as early in the process as we can. And we did that particularly in this case because we wanted to get as much information as we could for the cost estimate so that we could be as complete in that as possible. So the other half of the first proposal is around the cost estimating. We've spoken to Tom Albertson, who does really all our cost estimating work for us. Tom Albertson, as you know, is a builder here in town. He does a lot of commercial estimating for our firm. So he would provide that initial cost estimate under this proposal. And then it's our assumption, and from the conversations we'd had, that cost estimate and the design would be used to then seek approval from yourselves and from the voters on whether or not to proceed from there. As you're probably familiar, after that, you move into a phase, a few phases of just drilling further and further down into the details of the project, design development, when all the team is on staff to develop the design. You move into construction documents where we would obtain the permits, or at least prepare the documents for bidding and eventually permits, and then the public bidding process would come at the end of that. And we would assume then that's another decision point, approval point, on whether or not the project would move ahead. We have also assumed that we would be seeking planning board approval, and that would probably happen early in the design development phase. So that's not in this first set of work, but that would come immediately thereafter. Is there anything else I should add, Bill, do you think? Okay. One other thing we did put together today, a few thoughts on schedule, which if you are able, I can, or would like to look at those. I have a few copies here I can hand out to everyone if that'd be helpful. Sure.
She had put this schedule together so that we could see, or seek some guidance from the board as to what you'd like to see for when to go to ask the voters for a bond for construction. Generally, after the two first tasks are completed, including the design phase, schematic design phase and the cost estimating, then we could have a good number to build the cost estimate around, along with additional engineering and architectural services. So then we'd have a number that we could present to the voters for approval. So I'll let Amanda explain from there.
Sure. So we did this in two formats. So we looked at this in running to a June 2021 ballot, again for this first phase of work, and then looking at a quicker schedule of November of this year for approval, or at least putting it out to vote. I'll start with the top, and that gives a better overview of the process, and hopefully some of your feedback can come from that. We assumed, and maybe incorrectly, that we would probably start closer to the end of the fiscal year, maybe in May or even June. We outlined this using May 1st as our start date. From there, we would again move into that process of design, which we would anticipate here might take until the end of June. And as you can see, one of the big questions for us is who's involved in that process? Is it a building committee? How many times are we coming before yourselves? Who else, are we having any other public meetings that might go along with that? And then once we had approval on the basic concept from whomever you would choose to give that approval, then the rest of the engineering team, Bill's work would begin sooner in that initial phase, but the rest of the engineering team could come in and provide their summary work to provide for the estimate. Then we have, as this lines up, we have a couple of months there that might be absorbed by some of those extra meetings. And then, assuming we would, before the end of the year, release the design to the estimator. And then understanding we needed to seek approval, or gain approval rather, to go to the vote by March 22nd, to put that on the ballot for June. So you can see how that stacks up. There's definitely some extra time in there, but it could quickly be absorbed by the process and the approvals that are needed. When we looked at November, you can see how quickly that goes. I've even worked this backwards for you, it may be clearer that way. Starting from November, we would need approval for that ballot measure by August 24th, and then, meaning we would need to have the estimate for review by mid-July. We would have to start the estimating by early June, which if we don't start before, until March, leaves us essentially 3 months to get through the design work and all of the approvals and meetings that would be required. Even with 2 select board meetings, that's pretty much 2 weeks right out of that 3 months as well, because we're sending you documents ahead of time. So that schedule seems less achievable to me, and probably does not accommodate the type of public input and feedback that you would like to see, I would think. So that, in speaking with Bill, probably pushed us more towards a June of next year ballot measure.
So I guess I'd like some feedback from the board as to which process you prefer to look at. I mean, I think it does make sense to have as much time for public feedback and public meetings for people to discuss the project, ask questions, that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
I'm thinking the June, but then I also wonder what, if you get a ballot approval in November, are you gonna construct in the winter?
Well, keep in mind that after this process, after the question is hopefully approved for a bond, then the detailed work begins by the architects and
Detailed
engineers.
design drawings and all
Yes,
that.
and that, the length of that is how much time, Amanda, off the top of your head? I'm not gonna hold you.
I would think we would easily spend 6 months, because there's at least 2 months in bidding, really, by the time you're putting it out and getting those back and reviewing them, so at least 6, if not even more.
So unfortunately, it would, if we waited until June, then you're
Probably in the
in
construction season.
spring, exactly, you're in construction spring of 2022, which,
Right, so I mean, you're gonna be looking at a year and a half plus from the time of ballot.
yes.
So my question is, have you allocated any money in the upcoming budget
Yes.
to pay for some of the things we're looking?
For the first tasks, I have allocated some funding. Depending on what the discussion is tonight, I have identified some funding from the contingency account that's in the manager's budget that we can start the process with 2A architects, so that we have some funding there. Then I budgeted for the balance in next fiscal year. Certainly not the third task and on, because that would be contingent upon a bond vote. So we certainly have the funding built into next year's budget, which again is not a huge amount of money.
Well, we haven't seen the budget yet either.
That's true. That's true. But I've identified, we can take $5,000 out of the contingency from this year's budget to be able to start the process, so that we're not further behind than what we already are.
I hate to bring this up, but I can't help myself, and I also realize, despite having been on the board for 2.5 years, I'm late to the party. But the other day I saw in the newspaper was a comment that frequently I don't read them, but I did, and the person raised the question, does Rockport really need 2 fire stations? And I asked myself that question. I'm sure, I can see Jason and Bill probably rolling their eyes. The question is, would it be better to build a larger station at 1790 and then use the public safety building for something else?
Yeah,
Before Chief Peasley jumps in on that one.
I was gonna say, I was gonna ask you to, for the audience and people listening, to address that issue anyway, so.
Yeah, number one is just the space at Route 17 and 90 to build a larger building. It just isn't there. So that's the first issue. The second issue, and Chief Peasley can speak more intelligently about this, but is the fire insurance issue with those people that are serviced from that West Rockport Fire Station. So if you would, to eliminate that, because there's not large enough area for us to build what we would really need to put both stations together into that location, if we were to look at removing that one and expanding the one we currently have, or at another location, it's not
enough
possible.
room.
Right. So you have that issue with the fire insurance rating. As you probably know, as being homeowners, your fire insurance is tied to whether you're near a hydrant and how far you are away from a fire station, which certainly makes sense. I don't know if Jason wants to address that more than what I've said, or if there are other comments that he'd like to make about that.
It's nothing that we choose. It's an ISO insurance rating.
Right.
You can look at many towns in the county, Hope, Lincolnville. They have multiple stations based on, you have to draw a pin from where the station is in a radial circle around that. If you're outside that area, that changes the ISO rating for the town. Thus, 2 stations in multiple towns that are elongated. So the only way you could get away with that is building one central station. The only property that you could potentially do it at would be the DOT lot. If you drew the circle from there, you could cover east, west, south, north. That's why we have 2 stations. It's because of the insurance. It's not because we want one. It'd be easier to have one. But unfortunately, the way the town is laid out, where we have property, that's the reason for 2. Same as many other towns in the county, throughout the state, actually.
Let me just add to that, to throw a little water on that prospect of the DOT lot. Maine Department of Transportation also has access standards that, as you well may know, 117 and 90 are all retrograde arterials within the mobility corridor program of Maine DOT. So they're not functioning up to how DOT would like them to function, and they would preclude a municipality from creating a new public building on those segments of the road once the speed limit gets above 35 miles an hour.
So in other words, it's not a possibility.
Not to my understanding of the current set of rules.
Yeah.
So is there other comments about the time frame and the process too? I mean, that's one thing that we were looking to, is what do you, I assume we want to see a building committee. How much does the select board want to be involved with that? You're looking for residents, you're looking for, obviously, staff would be on that building committee, so we.
What kind of a ballpark are we looking at in terms of cost for this building?
We have not even started to, we need to
No,
get
we
through
are
the
not.
design.
It has 2 commas in it.
Okay.
It
Okay,
may.
Yeah.
It may
Then,
work.
Most
I
likely.
mean, then we want to take time, I mean, probably in any case.
Regarding
Parking?
Regarding process, as you have constructed buildings in your past work, it may be, for us to sit here and create a process from scratch might not be the best way to go. I would offer that we ask our town manager to throw together a outline of what he believes a best practice might be on this type of thing, and then we can add to it
Sure.
at another time.
But I think that he is looking for direction as to whether or not we want to do this as a November 2020 versus
right.
a
Yeah.
June 20.
I think probably
21.
2021 is, June ballot is probably more realistic.
I definitely think it's more realistic. I would love to be able to say, this November, because this is one of the projects that's been sitting there and not gaining a lot of momentum, and there is a definite need for it. We're also, as you know, looking at EMS service, and this structure would have a role to play in that as well. As it's, thought of with the plans that have been put together, just the overview plan. You know, there will be space there for an ambulance, should it be needed down the road. Or as you know, as the apparatus changes, size and styles too. But that certainly is something that has to be thought of when we're looking at this building.
Well, we just did an infrastructure bond in November, and I think that we need to have plenty of public input on this.
I agree.
And doing another one in November again isn't gonna sit well either.
No, I'm for the extra 7 or 8 months to make sure we have it right the first time.
To do it right.
You don't need a vote on that, do you?
I don't need a vote on that, no.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
In terms of the amount of involvement of the board, we could probably give them some input on that too. I don't think we want to be micromanaging this any more than we're micromanaging the library. I mean, that's my,
No, and obviously it's a completely different type of
Yeah.
structure, you know, and obviously not as complicated with the location and knowing that we have a pad that's already been developed and a lot of money spent on that pad as well. But I certainly can come back, you know, after speaking with Chief Peasley about a building committee and,
Right.
you know, perhaps there's a select board member that may be interested in sitting on that building committee.
Is it crucial that we use your contingency money right away, or can we put it off for a month or two till we look at our upcoming process?
No, we certainly could wait, if we're looking at the June 2021, that gives us time, you know, assuming a May 1st start.
I'm not saying put it off forever, I'm just saying at
Yeah.
least for a couple of months until we look at what you're gonna present to us.
Sure. Well, we'll know a lot more by the middle of March. I mean, that,
Yeah.
you know, with the budget proposal for FY '21, we know we have the funds, some funds that we can address to it now, but, yeah, we certainly can, you know, can wait until May 1st.
Anything that's done now, will it change if we, how long is that number good for, whatever we do now?
For the cost of our work,
yeah.
we'll stand behind those for however long you need. Yeah.
And I do want to point out too, that I know Amanda didn't say this, but they've given a 30% discount on the architect fees because they are residents of West Rockport, which I think is very much appreciated, so.
We
Yeah,
live a
very
third of a
much.
mile from the station. Obviously, it's important to us, and as residents, we wanted to offer that, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that is appreciated as well.
Is there any risk with the pad just sitting out there?
It's actually better, yeah.
Oh,
The longer it sits, the more compact it will be, and, I mean, not that it isn't done well, but,
Yeah.
and Bill certainly can speak to that better than I can, I'm not an engineer, but,
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we're not losing anything by waiting,
no.
or by taking the time, I mean.
Yeah, I would say that's what it is.
I will say that, you know, that there are issues with the West Rockport Fire Station, as we all know,
Right.
and we're dealing with them constantly, so it's one of those things where
Yeah,
we
it's
don't
not
want
ideal
we don't want to put money into the station at the same time it needs to be functioning, you know, as it is, so we're fighting little battles seems like every week, there, so. But I agree that the process needs to be a good public process as well, as I've said all along with this project. I just wish had started, you know, 6 months before, and we could be well on our way.
That's what I was gonna say. I wish it had been started earlier, but it wasn't.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so the next and last agenda item other than liaison reports is the discussion of the short-term rental regulation timeline and process that Bill has suggested, so.
yes, so whenever I develop a timeline and process such as this, I aim for a voting day, and then I backtrack to see if it'll work or not. Very much did that with the fire station process as well. So I aimed for the November vote, and you see the dates in front of you in your material. And I'll just run through this quickly for everybody that may be listening. So we would have staff research other municipalities' regulations, permit structures and ordinances and the like from March to April 22nd. Present those, that research to the select board and receive direction on April 27th. And then staff would prepare draft regulations in whatever form that may be from April 28th to May 20th. present those drafts to the board on May 26th, hold a public workshop or public hearing on the draft regulations on June 8th or 22nd. You'll see that I'm trying to stay away from 2 meetings in the summer, that second meeting for the board in the summer.
Thank you.
Trying to. Sometimes it doesn't always work. After the workshop or public hearing, then staff would make any changes after public comments or further select board direction until July 8th. Have another workshop if necessary on July 13th. And then August 10th, the select board would vote to approve the regulations or ordinance and place it on the November ballot. Then you have the dates that gets us to the election on November 3rd. I don't know if you have any questions on that. It is, I won't say that it's difficult to do this. It will be that things will be moving along pretty quickly. I passed this Bill Napower, our planner. He thinks it's reasonable to be able to make this happen. But again, there may be things in the works that we can't anticipate at this point, but we won't know until we start the process, so.
And we did hold one workshop or public comment.
Yes.
And what was that, fall?
Yes, it was.
And we've had invitation on our Facebook page and or website for people to comment on the topic as well, so.
Yeah, and we've already got, some of the research has already been started, obviously, from those comments. And keep in mind, too, that I looked at the schedule to try to have those public hearings, workshops also in the summer months, when those residents that are away during the winter months are back here so that they can weigh in as well.
Okay.
I think that's important. We have heard from those residents in the fall, so it'd be good to hear from others in the summer as well.
Right, and we wanted to do it actually last summer, but again, with the transition, that wasn't possible.
Sure.
I would suggest too, if you haven't already, to reach out to John Root Jr., who is really sort of a groundbreaker down in Rockport, or Rockland, over this issue. And I know he's not interested in being a consultant, but he has offered all of his material to share with you. It might save you a little bit of footwork, because I think there's a wealth of information he could send up here.
Yep.
Yeah, and there are other towns that have gone through this process,
Sure.
Cities and towns that I've already reached out to, some of my colleagues, and, they're more than willing, of course, to share
Yeah.
their materials as well, so.
So we have towns, or things that towns have done in Maine, and we also have quite a bit of information from towns outside of Maine too, so really quite a bit of info we have. So does the outline plan process look pretty good to you guys?
It does.
Yeah. Timing, good?
You're shaking your head?
No.
Did I miss something, Linda?
You did. August 25th to October 3rd only gives me a week for the ballots to be printed, and it takes between 2 and 3 weeks to get ballots printed. So I think we had talked about a little bit sooner.
Well, and that's why, and I didn't change that August 25th date, so the August 10th date would be when the board would make that decision, so then you could order ballots on the 11th.
So the August 10th is still good.
Yeah, and I guess
Yeah.
Hearing
I
myself.
know that I'm not available August 10th, that's a schedule that,
Oh.
so if, I just,
And
We'll
trust
vote.
me, I went through,
Yeah, we'll vote
We'll
for you.
vote anyway.
I just want, that's totally fine with me.
Yeah.
Well,
I went through-
hopefully we'll all be in accord.
and I went through a number of different schedules to try to stay away from certain dates and certain meetings, and
Yeah.
so. By that time, hopefully by August 10th, there'll be a set of regulations that has already been well vetted.
And, did you hear that? By that time, hopefully
Yeah.
there'll be a well-vetted regulations that we've, had plenty of time to comment on and.
Yeah, and I'm fine,
Tweak.
I don't wanna hold it up or speed it up, but I just wanted to be in
Yeah,
interest
yeah,
of full
Denise.
disclosure. So you guys take the hard votes.
Okay, so I think that's it on that, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we have, future meetings, office closures, President's Day is February 17th. We have budget meetings, February 19th. at 5:30. We have February 24th at 5:30 instead of the select board meeting, unless we have some emergency type thing that we need to have just a quickie select board meeting. And then February 27th, another budget review meeting in the Richardson Room at 5:30. And Bill has noted here that candidate nomination papers are available at the town office on March 2nd. The presidential primary referendum is March 3rd. And that's it.
I think the 19th, isn't that the joint meeting with the Select Board Budget Committee?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's for those that,
That February 19th one.
yeah, the 19th is
yeah.
a joint meeting, I
The
believe.
first one, yeah.
It would be nice if maybe Diane could reach out and just prod them a little bit to give them a week's worth of
There's an email going out tomorrow morning from
Yeah,
Megan.
good.
And we're getting our budgets this week, right?
Yes, probably Thursday, late afternoon.
Just before you go home for the weekend, right?
Well, only because Megan's off on Friday.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
let's move on to liaison reports, and who would like to start? Doug, you had something that you,
Yeah, I can go over my group. Seems like my voice is trying to give out here.
do you want me to start with somebody else?
No, because I don't think it's gonna get any better.
Okay.
Planning Board, there's no meeting until February 27th, and at that meeting, they should take up the hotel parking issue again with the ZBA ruling in hand. Investment Committee has not had a meeting. Parks and Beautification, it's the middle of winter, so you wonder what we could possibly be doing, but there's actually a lot going on. The Mugo Pines were pulled out of Mary Lay Park. Thank you, Bill and Mike. I think that's a big improvement on how that's going to appear this summer. At Wednesday's meeting, we're expecting to get the preliminary bid package from our landscape architect. And our plan is to take that package and then over the next 2 weeks, look it over, run it by Bill, run it by Megan. And then at the March 10th meeting, we'll have Keith Smith, who's the landscape architect, actually come up for our March 10th meeting. And at that point, we'll finalize the bid package. And it'll be sent to the select board for approval. And we'll sort of have to decide what to do with it after that. But, so it's pretty exciting. I talked a little bit with Bill today about our mowing and maintenance contracts, which I think, as Deborah and Denise know, they're pretty lousy contracts. Bill's obviously been busy with everything else, so, you know, it's not a super high priority, but we are getting into the growing season before too long, and just something to keep in the back of our minds. Library Committee, not much going on there. Our next meeting is February 21st, and we're going to do a tour of the library at that time. Library construction, I think probably the big thing here is the intersection work that's coming up. Right now, all the other work is interior to the building, so you really can't see anything. But I think when we start moving the intersection around, that's going to get people's attention, and I'm sure there'll be pro and con comments, and that should happen 2 to 3 weeks. Deborah, I'm going to let you talk about the RES committee. This parking group that I'm part of, and that includes Randy, Bill Napower, Hannah Sisk, Bill, myself, Mike, and Joe Sternowski. I think they're off to an excellent start. We've had a really good meeting trying to, count the parking spaces and then beginning to think about ideas that we might do to just improve the general parking conditions around town. Not just as they are, but, is there any potential for new parking spaces? I think we've heard sort of loud and clear from the populace that parking is definitely an issue here in town. And we actually saw it 2 weeks ago. I don't know if any of you went through town when the Tom and Max show was on at the Opera House and the 2 restaurants were open. We had people parking up on front lawns and everything else. It was unbelievable. There were over 240 cars that I counted. So it was pretty remarkable.
You weren't at either of the events, you were counting
Well,
cars.
nothing's gonna help us with that.
Right. So, but I had a couple other thoughts. I put together a brilliantly incisive white paper that I submitted to the committee, and I ended it up with some discussion points, and I guess I just want to very quickly go over those for this group's consideration. You know, if you look at it, the truly determinant factor on whether or not we have, quote, adequate parking, close quote, is how far people are willing to walk. You know, I mean, that's what it comes down to. If you go to a city, Boston, New York, you know, you walk 10 blocks there and you don't think anything about it. You know, here, if you have to park up on Union Street, you know, we all complain that we have to walk. So there's not going to be any right answer to this because a lot of it comes down to human nature. So here are some questions. Is the town willing to keep its right-of-ways clear to improve the quality and the number of parking opportunities? You know, there's going to be places around town where we've sort of ceded to people's front lawns spaces that could conceivably be used for high-quality parking places. Can employee parking spots be designated by the businesses? Is the town willing to make some streets one-way with parking on just one side? Are TIF funds available to help with any of this? This is a great one. Is the town willing to expand the library parking back to 14 spaces as originally planned? Is the town interested in exploring the use of privately owned in-town lots? And is the town willing to make necessary investments in, say, Kramer Park to improve the parking there, which has up to 27 slots if you improve the surface and the lighting? So kind of my conclusion out of this, there's a lot of opportunities to improve the parking in town if there's the political will. You know, and it's just going to be, you know, how much this select board is willing to do. So.
And will this committee, they'll be evaluating some of what you've got in the white paper and make recommendations?
A lot of it's already covered in there, not all of it. Like, as you know, I'm an advocate for the one-way streets. So.
Well, I can tell you right now that I'm not in favor of changing the position on parking with the library. It was very controversial. It was just made, a few months ago, 6 months ago. And while I think that that we need to be creative in other ways, and actually in a couple of ways that you didn't even mention on your list, I think that's an issue that's been decided, and I'm not in favor of revisiting it.
Well, and I'm not making it as a motion, but first of all, you know, our vote was taken before the townspeople made it so clear to us that parking is a concern that people have, plus you're 20% of the board, Deborah.
That's correct, and I just expressed my 20%. I have the ability to express my 20%, and I'm laying it out there. That's my 20%. Certainly, if the board wants to go a different direction, that's fine. And I don't think that when we say that it was originally contemplated that there would be 14 parking places, I take issue with that, because I think that was never set out, as you know, for public participation. So it was contemplated by a few. It was contemplated by a few.
It was on the site.
Let's go back to liaison reports.
Yes.
Yes. All right, so anything else, anything else, Doug?
No, I'm finished.
Okay.
It's too late, you're already hooked.
I'll go ahead, Madam Chair, if okay. Harbor Committee had a meeting last week. We discussed some of the leases down in the harbor, some issues with online mooring registrations, reviewing and prepping for summer activity, such as food trucks and celebrations and such. issues around excise tax and mooring registrations and online issues. It's just administrative type concerns and things around that. And the reason is one of these things is the town of Rockport, rightly so, requires that excise tax be paid before mooring registrations are issued. The opportunity to not pay your excise tax is maybe present, or could have been present if not done so. So the issue is, if you are a out-of-town mooring holder, you have to pay your excise tax in the town in which you live. So it's difficult for the town of Rockport to match up who paid their excise tax and who didn't to those people that live out of town. So they're just working on some of the technicalities around that.
So is that like non-residents?
That would be like non-residents.
Wait, Linda, would you like to weigh in on that?
But people who come in to pay their excise tax or to pay their mooring, for example, for other municipalities that are neighbors of ours, they have to prove that they have paid the excise
Correct.
tax in their own town before they can even get a mooring. So if they
Correct.
live in Rockport, they have to excise their boat first and then go to the neighboring town and pay their mooring. So we're not the only town that's doing that. It's other towns do the same thing.
Sure.
Otherwise, people don't
Right, and this is,
register their
this
boats.
is the old way of doing, I won't say the old way, but the way we've done it in the past with presence and being in the town office and doing paperwork in that way, it all works. This is only around online activity where we're trying to improve the convenience of excise tax, mooring registrations, and all the other types of things we're trying to do online. So,
They can do online registrations with boats.
yes, regular state registrations.
Inland
that-
fisheries.
Yes, this often has to do with also a lot of people with documented vessels as well.
Does the Harbor Committee, apropos of Jan's comments, do they think about rising sea levels at all? And I simply ask this because a couple of weeks ago, during one of the high tides on the back of a storm, you know, we had waves actually up in the Lobster Landing parking lot. We had waves washing over onto the boat club.
That is one of the items that the harbor master certainly is thinking about that and bringing those issues
Okay.
as well. The capital improvement committee is currently still planning on finding a date to have a meeting in April. The pathways committee had a meeting on the 6th. Notes are forthcoming. There was a summit around pedestrian safety with the DOT scheduled for last week at the high school, and that was postponed, and I don't have another date on that due to weather, and that's all I have.
Doug, the Parks meeting is coming up, as Doug had mentioned. The Conservation Commission is coming up. The one thing I'll ask them, it sort of makes sense to me, is to see if they want to participate in the brown tail and the EBA or EAB tree study.
The inventory.
As the inventory, yeah. One of the things that, this doesn't have anything to do with my liaison, but I would like to ask Bill if he might be able to come up with a resolution to, we have a contract with someone to do sidewalks. And I know Deborah mentioned it earlier, but nowhere in that contract does it say anything other than snow blowing them, shoveling them. And if there's nothing in there that requires them to come back, in particular, the last few days when we've had a tremendous amount of ice around, we need to ensure that somebody, whether it's the highway, and I know they're busy as well, but.
Yeah, no, I've already had these discussions with Mike Young.
All right.
About maintenance, which is one of the reasons it had gotten better.
One time.
Well,
No, it did.
just-
It was
yeah.
great that it got better that one time, but
And-
now it's,
and
you
when
know,
it-
now it's gonna freeze or
When is our-
whatever. Now it's back to its normal.
When is our contract up? Because our contract people here might want to have a hand in the next one.
With the sidewalk, I'd have to look, but I think it was just recently
Yeah, it's like a year to year, I think, or,
I'd have to look.
I can't recall, but
But I am working on a resolution with the Department of Public Works for sidewalk maintenance, for a number of reasons. Obviously, with the library opening up again,
Yeah.
this fall, I think it's important. And if we want more use of this building with more events and the like, then it's important that we maintain the sidewalks adequately.
I'm not sure select board can walk home without killing themselves. Anyway,
yes.
but Denise, did you have any?
We got the ZBA coming up this week. I don't know, do we have the final decision that's ready to go over to the planning board?
On,
On the ZBA decision on the parking?
I'd have to check in
Okay.
with Bill.
That's a question yeah, we'll double check that the Wednesday night, that's Wednesday night's meeting at 5:30. Opera House Committee's meeting this Thursday, so nothing to report on that. And then Bill mentioned that Legacy Rockport is going to be talking about restoration of the lime kilns, and then also the March 15th community supper in the Opera House, which I think they'll be getting information out soon. So set that date aside. That's it.
Thank you. RES redevelopment committee, I don't know if you want to add anything, Doug, but they met on, as Bill already noted, they met on January 30th. Unfortunately, I was not able to be at that meeting, but Doug was there, and they're meeting again on March 19th at 5:30. Did you want to add anything?
Well, yeah, I think Bill mentioned it, but it bears repeating that we had a very good set of questions and guidelines set out that we're prepared now to ask each applicant, and I think it was a good organizational meeting that should make future meetings run very smoothly.
Good.
The-
Okay, I'm not done on my liaison.
Well, I
reports.
was just going to ask if you would ask about the ambulance meeting. I've
Yes.
forgotten to.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Do we have a new date for that?
We don't, I'm waiting for the chair.
This is
of
for
the-
the ambulance review
Do-
meeting.
Who's the vice chair? Because we don't seem to be having much luck with the chair.
I don't know who the vice chair is, but I have asked
I don't even know who the chair is.
Mark Ratner.
Mark.
Oh, okay. So, we obviously need to, I've never attended one of those meetings. We need to get that going.
Yes.
Okay, so I mentioned RES. The next thing is annual report. We, of course, have to do a board report in the annual report.
What do you mean, we, Kemosabe?
Yeah, I know, I recognize that. So I looked at Ken's from last year, and I will freely admit that I have plagiarized a paragraph or two of his. But then I tried to come up with some of the, the bigger things that we did this year. So I had a couple of items in there that were just factual things, dates and whatever that I wanted Diane and Bill to fill in
Yep.
for me.
Which I haven't done yet. I
Okay,
haven't looked
so
at it
as
yet.
soon as you do that, then I will circulate it to you guys for your input. But I didn't want to give you something that had a bunch of blanks in it, okay? But I am on top of it.
Yes, she is.
The other thing is my favorite group, Midco Solid Waste, is having an executive committee meeting tomorrow afternoon to discuss personnel matters. And we did get a budget approved, January 31st, or before January 31st, though it wasn't before December 31st. And I think that's about, we did amend some of our bylaws.
Yep.
We need to amend some more, but we got the most crucial ones done, I think. And I think that's it.
I think Amanda's thinking, that could be me on one of these committees.
And on broadband, we're doing those articles on broadband, as you know, and I had circulated the three that we had submitted. And I have now drafted in coordination with others the next three, and with one left to go. So we will be providing those to you guys.
Linda had provided us an email of a list of people that had passed in 2019. It would be nice if, I've looked it over, and unfortunately, I know probably 20 out of the 32 that were on it, but we need to,
Forward me some names so that we can put a list together, and then the board can decide for your dedication as well as for the
I'm,
memoriam.
I'm still okay with my dedication submission, but
Yep.
the other one was the preceding year, so.
Right.
Anyway,
Okay, so, somebody, is that it? Anybody have anything else? Otherwise, we can make a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
so seconded.
All in favor? 500, thank you.
Don't forget to stick around for your lovely photo.